Hello everybody, welcome to this Train Sim World 4 news video. Today we're going to be talking about the Semmeringbahn, which is a recently announced route for Train Sim World 4. It is the second Austrian route, and it's a fascinating line. I'm a little bit confused and somewhat disappointed by some of the things that Dovetail have included, or not. Um, and the screenshots aren't particularly impressive so far, but this route holds a lot of potential. We haven't seen much of it, so I'm going to hold my optimism for now, at least. But we'll get straight into it. So the overview, it is a 68-kilometer long route. A lot of it does not actually cover the Semmering railway. The Semmering railway is sort of from here-ish to about there-ish, so just this mountain pass section, and then they've just extended it up this straight bit on the end just to add a bit of route mileage, which, you know, I'm not entirely opposed to. But this is the quick section, and then we got the slow bit through the mountains with all the viaducts and whatever, and then comes back out the other side. 68 kilometers long, 17 stations. We've got our OBB 1116, which is a Taurus, and the OBB BMZ coach. Before we go on as well, this is the viaduct from this. I mean, I know it's still in progress, but normally they don't release screenshots until they're ready to. That looks a bit atrocious. I'm not gonna lie. That looks like this. There's no. This is a stone brick viaduct, right? And it looks like it's made out of plastic or Play-Doh. I'd like to see a bit more texturing, a bit more detail go into that. Thank you very much. The rocks look alright, the rocks look fine. And this is that same viaduct. It looks a little bit better from here. We can actually see some texturing on the side. The trees, again, I don't like the trees, but that's common for every route. I think the trees are rubbish in this game. And a common theme you'll see in all the screenshots, it looks like a nuclear bomb has just gone off. It's so bright, so unbelievably bright. Whilst we're on the topic of the rolling stock as well, this is the only rolling stock you're going to get. The OBB, Taurus Loco, and the BMZ wagons. I'm pretty certain this is sort of the same base model as the IC carriages that we already have, and this is just a 182 or a MRC ES64. It's the same thing, just in a different class number and some different numbers and some very minor differences to the inside. And this is just a layer from Christ, what was that route? I've forgotten the one in the one that came with Train Sim World 4. I never play it ever, and I've forgotten its name entirely. But the talent one, but I mean, it's sort of, I guess you could say it comes included with the route because everyone who owns this route will have to have Train Sim World 4, and if you own Train Sim World 4, actually no, I guess not. A few people might have a regional variation that won't, and they won't have the talent one. So for most people, it would be the case that they're going to have the talent one, but for some people it isn't. And just again, this is what that viaduct looks like, unless it's a different viaduct, which maybe it is. Maybe they all look the same. Hey, who knows? Who knows? Looks like that one, but okay. I'll stop shit talking. I'd like to see a little bit more detail going into things. This is, well, that looks to be the same thing, just from a different camera angle. Yeah, it just looks a little bit unpolished. The overhead wires look fairly intriguing, and the distant scenery looks a little bit disgusting. I just, these trees, the shadows are so off-putting. They're horrendous. And I think the rocks look worse than on some of the other more recent routes. I'm not overly impressed by that. Next one, this is just on the quick bit with our 1116 and the coaches. It's got neither pantograph up. That's peculiar. Maybe that's a hint for a scenario to come. But yeah, this is the unremarkable part of the line. Looks like it just runs through a forest for most of that. But these things can get up to, these locomotives can do 230, and the coaches probably 200. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's at least 160 kilometers an hour for sure, maybe even 200. But I mean, it's Austria, but it's more or less Germany, isn't it? Just pissed off so many people. But from a railway perspective, they both use PZB. They both use very similar signaling systems. So I think there's, yeah, who knows? Who knows? Mind you, we've got the other Rosenheim to Salzburg, which is, has a little bit inside Austria, but I don't quite get the appeal of all of this cross-border stuff because it's just, it's a Schengen border. It's not a real border, really. Come on. Anyway, it's on a tangent. So the rolling stock, as I mentioned many times, many times already, we've got the OBB Class 1116 Taurus. It's a Eurosprinter ES64U, I believe. The ones that play the scale. Personally, I already own this for Train Sim World 4 twice. First for the DBBR 182 pack for Rapid Transit, which brought these locomotives and the Dostos to that route in a very similar livery, might I add. And second for Hamburg Lübeck, which came with the black MRCE ES64. So that's a bit disappointing. I mean, I guess if it fits with the route, I know they do use them a lot in this area, and I guess they might use the BMZ wagons a lot as well. But I'm just the rolling stock choice. It doesn't strike me as very remarkable. Like they could have done something like a Railjet, which uses the same locomotive, or like they use Taurus locomotives. They're probably a different class number, but broadly speaking, that's the same locomotive, and slightly different coaches and a cab car on the back. If they did that, if they went with that, then they could layer onto the aforementioned Austrian route that I cannot name. They could layer onto, I think, Rosenheim to Salzburg, although they might not be playable. They would add a lot to various routes. And they would introduce some new rolling stock, whereas this is basically just a different livery of things that have already existed to some extent. The BMZ wagons, as I mentioned earlier, they're basically just an intercity wagon. An intercity coach, and I've already bought that twice. No, just once for that, which is a bit of a shame. And of course, there are layers for the talent, as we saw. So a little bit disappointing there, but nonetheless, I'm excited to see where this route goes, but I'll keep it realistic. As far as any kind of further research you might want to look at, just Google it. There are some fantastic YouTube videos because there are a lot of spirals, as I'm sure you can imagine with this route map. It's sort of like the European or Austrian variant of the horseshoe curve. It's just a really spectacular line. It's really spectacular. Anyway, that is it. I hope you've enjoyed. I hope you've learned something. Tomorrow, 4,000 sub special live stream. Be there, unless you're watching this. Not today. So thank you all so much for watching, and I shall see you next time, talking about San Bernardino line, but that will be next Friday. So yeah, see you then. Bye.